The Cleveland Cavaliers are off to one of the hottest starts in NBA history. They've begun the season 16-1 and have truly been nothing short of dominant. Offensively, no one's been better. They're scoring more points than any other team in the league, and they're shooting with the best efficiency in the entire league, both from the field and from three. Production that unsurprisingly has produced the #1 offensive rating. But this isn't even remotely a one-dimensional group, as to this point in the season, they're also a top 10 defensive squad. But how did they get here? How was every piece of this Cavaliers team built? Now, one thing I do pretty much every day before all the games tip off is cook up an entry on PrizePicks, the sponsor for today's video. Far and away the top sports pick'em platform out there right now. It's just more or less on stats for up to 100 times your entry. They have pretty much every stat from every single sport. Just the other day, I smacked an NFL 5-pick flex play. My $20 entry turned into $500. I'm definitely going to be putting together another one for the Thanksgiving games, especially since right now it's Picksgiving over on PrizePicks. They're running tons of different holiday-themed promotions throughout the week, so stay tuned, and then make sure to take advantage of the Tyreek Hill free square, where he only has to get a single yard. If somehow you guys haven't checked out PrizePicks yet, I've got a pretty awesome hookup for you. If you click the link in the description, then use the promo code Jimmer when you sign up. After you play your first entry of at least $5, you're going to get $50 instantly. Thank you PrizePicks for sponsoring today's video. Let's first look at their most common starting lineup, a 5-man group posting a 122 offensive rating to go along with a 109 defensive rating, or in other words, a lineup outscoring their opponents by nearly 13 points per 100 possessions. The first player to join this group was Darius Garland. During the 2019 season, Garland only appeared in 5 games at Vanderbilt before having his season cut short due to injury. Luckily, however, he had gotten off to a really hot start. He was averaging 20 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists, shooting 53% from the field and 48% from 3 on nearly 6 attempts a game. The sample size was small. Darius Garland himself didn't have ideal size, but the talent and skill with the ball in his hands was undeniable. So for pretty much the entire draft process, Garland was looked at as one of the consensus top prospects in the class. A class that at the time was believed to be one of the best we had seen in a long time. It had a big three at the top of Zion Williamson, Ja Morant, and RJ Barrett. A trio it would have been shocking to see any member of fall outside of the top 3 picks. But early on, it was Garland that was the favorite to be the very next selection off the board. A spot that following the draft lottery was held by the Los Angeles Lakers, but not for too long. After a blockbuster trade that sent Anthony Davis to Los Angeles, the New Orleans Pelicans now held that 4th pick on top of their 1st overall selection. Then on draft night, we saw the selection switch hands once again. The Hawks packaged together their 8th and 17th picks to move up and select DeAndre Hunter, a two-way wing that had just played an instrumental part of Virginia's national title. This left Cleveland in a weird spot at 5. A year ago, they had selected an undersized point guard in Colin Sexton with their top selection. Garland was clearly the top prospect on the board, but the fit alongside Sexton was less than ideal to say the least. Because of that, many thought they would go in favor of someone like Texas Tech wing Jared Culver. But with Cleveland still very early on in their post-LeBron rebuild, they decided to ignore the potential fit issues and select Garland. Once getting to Cleveland, it wouldn't take long for him to prove himself as one of the better playmakers and perimeter threats in the NBA. Flash forward to today, and he's now averaging over 20 points and 7 assists, shooting with remarkable splits of 49% from the field, 44% from 3, and 94% from the line. The next piece of the lineup to come to Cleveland was Isaac Okoro. Following the 2020 season that saw the Cavaliers finish with a 19-46 record, they landed the 5th overall selection in the draft, which they used to select the 6'5" Auburn wing. Now, Okoro was coming off a freshman season that on paper really didn't turn many heads. He averaged 13 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists, while shooting 51% from the field and just 29% from 3. But while the offensive side was still very raw, scouts were sold on Okoro's potential defensively at the NBA level. Okoro is a high-energy player and disruptive defender who changes the game with his play. His defensive ability is truly special. He can guard just about every position on the court. So with the Cavaliers coming off a season at the time where they finished dead last on the defensive end, going with a guy like Okoro felt like the right pick. The prevailing sentiment across the NBA world was that if Okoro can make significant leaps beyond the perimeter, this selection would be a home run for Cleveland. Now early on, it didn't really look like that was going to be the case. But over the last few years, while Okoro has never been able to really ramp up his volume in any significant way, he's steadily made big improvements beyond the perimeter. This season, while he's averaging just 6 points, that's almost all from spot-up threes, where he's shooting over 47%. The next piece was Jarrett Allen. Leading up to the trade deadline of the 2021 season, James Harden was the talk of the NBA world after demanding a trade from the Houston Rockets. And come January 14th, his demands were met. He was sent to the Brooklyn Nets to team up with Kyrie and Kevin Durant in what would eventually become a 4-team deal between the Rockets, Nets, Cavaliers, and Pacers. The Cavaliers' end of that deal saw them send Dante Exum, a first-round pick in 2022 from Milwaukee, and a 2024 second-rounder in exchange for Taurean Prince and the big piece, Jarrett Allen. Allen was the Nets' first-round selection in 2017, who at this time was 4 years into his career, quickly establishing himself as one of the premier rim protectors in the league, something he's only continued to do since arriving in Cleveland. The next piece added was Evan Mobley. From the time Mobley left high school as a top recruit to the night he was drafted in the 2021 draft, his stock didn't budge at all. He was a highly coordinated 7-foot big who lived up to the hype as a freshman at USC, averaging 16 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 blocks, shooting 58% from the field. Then going into draft night, it felt like we all knew where he would end up. Cade Cunningham was the clear top prospect. Behind him, there was some conversations involving Mobley, but almost everyone expected Jalen Green in that spot. And on draft night, that's exactly what we saw go down. The Pistons grabbed Cade, the Rockets got Green, which left the Cavaliers at 3 with the decision made for them. Now going into Mobley's rookie season, there were some concerns surrounding his fit alongside Jarrett Allen, but almost immediately, those were wiped away. From day one, the two combined to be one of the most feared defensive frontcourts in the league. A frontcourt which, paired with an ascending talent like Darius Garland at the helm, had the Cavaliers skyrocketing up the Eastern Conference. They doubled their win total from the year prior, going from 22 to 44 wins. It was now clear the rebuild in Cleveland was over. So now looking to really begin to contend in the East, only a year since the selection of Mobley, the Cavaliers would make their biggest move since the addition of LeBron James. They reached an agreement to acquire Utah Jazz star guard Donovan Mitchell. In return, they sent Utah Colin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, their most recent lottery selection Agbaji, along with 3 unprotected first-rounders in 2025, 2027, and 2029. They also gave up the right to swap their first-round selections in 2026 and 2028. The move for Mitchell continued to push the Cavs up the Eastern Conference. After finishing with the 9th seed in 2022, they finished as the 4th seed in their first season with Mitchell in 2023. Then this past year, once again finished as the 4th seed, and as mentioned this season are currently the top seed in the league, led by Donovan Mitchell, who's averaging 25 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists, shooting with 47-41 splits. Now, while this starting lineup is playing absolutely incredible, getting a lot of credit for all the success the Cavaliers are experiencing so far this season, it can't be ignored just how dominant their bench has been. In fact, the best net rating on the entire team, posting an absurd plus 21 on the back of a team-high 128 offensive rating, is the team's 6th-man Caris LeVert. While this is the lowest volume LeVert's seen since his rookie season in 2017, his efficiency has never been better, both as a scorer and a playmaker. He's averaging 12 points and 5 assists, shooting 53% from the field and 46% from 3. Now, LeVert came to Cleveland in between the selections of Evan Mobley and the trade for Donovan Mitchell. The Cavaliers made a move at the 2022 deadline to acquire him from the Pacers, giving up Ricky Rubio, a first-rounder in 2023, which would end up being Ben Shepherd, a second-round pick in 2022, which became Andrew Nembhard, and an additional second-rounder in 2027. The second biggest role off the bench belongs to Dean Wade, someone who's actually one of the oldest additions to this Cavs group. After 4 years at Kansas State, the 6'9" power forward went undrafted in the 2019 draft. However, shortly after, the Cavaliers signed him to a 2-way contract, and a year later converted that to a 4-year, $5.6 million deal. The next biggest role is Georges Niang, who began his career in 2016 after being selected with the 50th pick in the second round by the Indiana Pacers. But after just 1 season, he was waived by Indiana. He then spent a year in the G League before going to the Jazz, where we started to see things pick up. He played 69 games in 2019, 66 in 2020, and 72 in 2021, where he averaged 7 points, almost exclusively scoring from outside, where he was shooting 43%. He then signed a 2-year minimum deal with Philly, where he continued to prove his ability as a consistent threat from distance over his 2 seasons there. In free agency a year ago, looking to bring in help on the wing, the Cavaliers signed Niang to a 3-year deal worth $26 million. Cleveland's rotation right now is extremely deep, probably the biggest factor to why they've been so consistent so far. They have 10 players that have played in at least 13 games for an average of at least 19 or more minutes. One of those players is Jerome, someone who's truly been a diamond in the rough for them. On this season, he's averaging 13 points and 4 assists on absurd efficiency, 60% from the field and 54% from 3. Production that unsurprisingly has shown up in the team's output, as he currently has the 3rd highest net rating on the team. For some more context on just how dominant the bench minutes have been in Cleveland, of the top 5 net ratings in the Cavaliers rotation, Evan Mobley is the only starter. Something that's not just a product of how well they fit together, having floor spacing up and down paired with the playmaking of guys like Jerome and LeVert, but also how seamlessly they fit alongside this main core. Something that's been very evident for Jerome specifically, being able to step up when the team's been dealing with injuries. Now, to get to this point, it's been an up and down journey for him. After an incredible collegiate career capped off by a national title with Virginia, he was selected with the 24th overall pick in the 2019 draft by the 76ers. Shortly after that selection, however, he was sent to the Boston Celtics and then later to the Phoenix Suns. A year later, he was traded once again, this time to OKC as a small piece of the trade that brought Chris Paul to Phoenix. There he had a solid role, but dealt with some injuries, one of which required surgery that ended his 2022 season. Ahead of the 2023 season, he was traded to Houston before being waived the following day. Just 3 years after going in the first round of the draft, he was now having to sign a 2-way deal with the Golden State Warriors. He would play 45 games with them, and then ahead of last season, signed a deal with the Cleveland Cavaliers, but barely saw the NBA court. Obviously, this season, it's been a much different story. With Cleveland coming into the season dealing with some injuries in their backcourt, minutes emerged for Jerome, and he's taken full advantage. The last main piece of the rotation is Sam Merrill, a player who has a pretty one-dimensional skill set. But when it comes to shooting the ball, Merrill can do that with the very best of them. Over his last 2 years in Cleveland, over 80% of his attempts have come from 3, where he's been a 40% shooter. Now, Merrill's another player that Cleveland has managed to get a lot more value from than pretty much the entire league expected. He's had a pretty unique journey to this point. Prior to college, he actually went on a 2-year mission for the LDS Church to Nicaragua. He then spent 4 years at Utah State, capped off by a senior season where he was averaging 20 points as a 41% three-point shooter. The 6'4" guard then became the Mr. Irrelevant of the 2020 draft, being selected with the very last selection of the night by the Pelicans, but then traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. Then a year later, he was sent along with 2 second-round picks to the Grizzlies in exchange for Grayson Allen. Just a few months after that, in the middle of the 2022 season, he was waived by Memphis. He then signed with the Kings ahead of the 23 season, but was waived before taking the court. Then a couple months after that, he was actually selected with the top pick of the G League draft by the Cavaliers G League affiliate, the Charge. During that season, Merrill really impressed, proving to be one of the best shooters in the G League, averaging 15, 4, and 3, shooting 42% from distance. He followed that up by torching the 2023 Summer League, where he led the Cavaliers to a Summer League title, averaging 20 points, shooting 45% from 3, while taking over 11 attempts a game. He clearly deserved a real shot in the league, and last season, he got that in Cleveland. He appeared in 61 games for an average of 18 minutes, where he dropped 8 points a night, pretty much only scoring beyond the perimeter, where he shot 40%. So that's the group we've been seeing so far. A group that at least right now looks like one of the deepest groups in the entire league, constructed in a variety of ways. 3 top picks, 3 big trades, and 4 incredible values in free agency. Then what's wild is we haven't even mentioned Max Strus, who hasn't played so far this season due to injury. Strus is another player whose career began by going undrafted in 2019, but after finding his way to Miami, quickly proved to be one of the more versatile role players in the league, eventually making a massive impact in Miami, making their run to the 2023 finals, a performance that helped secure him a big payday, joining the Cavaliers a year ago on a 4-year, $63 million deal. In his first year of that contract, he averaged 12 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists, starting in all 70 of the games he played in. he would finish the year third on the team in net rating. It's pretty hard to imagine his eventual return to the lineup is going to hinder the success in Cleveland in any way whatsoever. And then finally, when talking about the construction of this Cavaliers group, the addition of head coach Kenny Atkinson has to be brought up. He's currently the massive favorite to be the coach of the year, and for good reason. While the individual success of this rotation has been impressive, and the front office deserves a lot of credit for that, for the most part, this is the same group we saw in Cleveland a year ago, a group that finished with 48 wins and posted the 7th best defensive rating in the league, right around the same spot they find themselves in today. It's the offensive side where Atkinson has completely transformed this team as we know it. A year ago, Cleveland's offense finished in the bottom half, which, as mentioned, compares to the #1 offensive team in the league so far this season. And luckily for Cleveland, this is just the first year of a 5-year deal that Atkinson signed with Cleveland this past offseason. You really have to tip the cap to this front office. Atkinson's locked up long-term. Donovan Mitchell and Garland are on contract through 2028. Jared Allen through 2029. Mobley through 2030. Strus and Okoro through 2027. Niang and Wade through next season. Now LeVert, Jerome, and Merrill will hit the open market this offseason, but it's clear the Cavaliers are in one of the best long-term positions. An impressive feat for a team that's a pretty small market when LeBron's not in town.